Saturday morning, we're going to talk technology with our tech expert, Luis Alvarez, the CEO of the Alvarez Technology Group. Luis, welcome back. And by the way, welcome back home.
Yes, thank you so much. Yeah, just got back from vacation this week. Ronnie and I spent a week in Hawaii where it was actually cooler than it was here during the same week.
Yeah,
you guys had some really hot temperatures. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a little bit warm through the weekend, but things started to cool down a bit, at least on the coast on Thursday. We're recording this program Thursday afternoon, and it's much more pleasant this afternoon than it was on Wednesday when I believe the thermometer reached 93 degrees for Monterey. So
that's crazy.
Yeah, it sure is. And it was, I have a friend who lives down in Greenfield. It was 107 down there. But he has air conditioning because, they regularly see temps in the 90s during the summer.
Oh, yeah.
So they planned ahead many moons ago. But for those of us living here, in Monterey, nobody has air conditioning.
No, it's a hard commodity to find unless you're staying at a hotel.
Right. Hey, so one of the things we want to talk about here, there's a lot of tech news to cover this weekend. And one of them is a bill that our Governor Newsom vetoed. It's an AI regulatory bill that a lot of people thought this might have a fighting chance to get in there and really offer some protection to consumers. But he ended up vetoing that bill, and it's really a big win for big tech, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And this was one of the bills that we talked about a few weeks ago that were, winding their way through the legislature at the last minute. And he surprised a number of people because typically the governor is pretty good about signaling whether he's for or against something to keep the legislature from bringing something before him that it's going to be shot down anyway. So he must have changed his mind at the last minute, I think. But what this does is this was a bill designed to put guardrails around developing generative AI. And I won't go into the technical details because there's a bunch of them. But the idea was to make sure that AI that was being developed in California had a certain level of protections against consumers and things like that. But the problem is that some of those things made it so unworkable for the companies to continue development here in the state that they threatened to leave California and say, look, we can't develop our products in a state where we are limited by what we can do. We need to have the full breadth and ability to innovate. And then after we come up with something, then you can go back in and say, okay, well, here we need to limit this or limit that. And I think the agreement or the argument finally made its way into Newsom's consciousness. And he said, that makes sense to me. And he had a lot of folks that, not just tech companies, but other politicians, including Nancy Pelosi, that was trying to argue against this particular bill. So it got vetoed and we don't have to worry about it.
Interesting. Well, there are two industries in California that have, I think a lot of people would agree, an inordinate amount of influence over our legislators and governors. And that is out of Northern California, the tech industry, and in Southern California, Hollywood. Those are the two industries that typically get most of what they want. And then if you're looking for an industry that never gets anything and gets disrespected and kicked to the curb almost every day of the year, and that's agriculture, particularly ag in the San Joaquin Valley. So just kind of the way the bread is buttered sometimes. So moving on to another story here, a fascinating story in TechCrunch about Microsoft tapping 3 Mile Island's nuclear plant to help power AI. We're still talking about AI here, and it's about, you and I have talked a lot about the need for a tremendous growth in the energy infrastructure in this country, that if we are going to have a world of electrified everything run by electricity, then we're going to have to find a way to generate those kilowatt hours. And one of the things they're talking about now is for many, many years, the nuclear energy industry was a whipping boy for a lot of people. But now folks are coming back around, Louis, and a lot of the people that were critics many years ago of nuclear are admitting that, the only way to get to where we need to be in a reasonable amount of time is we have to invest in nuclear, because a lot of these alternate energy ideas, things like windmills and solar, they're all great, but they just don't offer the scale that you need. Maybe these kinds of industries can be producing all that energy in 100 years, but we're talking about trying to take like a state like California all electric by maybe 2050. Well, that's only 25 years from now. You're not going to necessarily be able to get there to where you need to be with solar and some of these other alternative means. So now they're looking back at nuclear. And what's going on with this?
Yeah, so in order to power the AI revolution and all the accompanying data centers, all the other things that need to happen, you need a lot of energy. Right now, they're projecting that over the, in the next 10 years or so, we're going to need to generate an additional 200 gigahertz or gigawatts rather of power. And to do that with limiting it to non-carbon-based forms of generating electricity, that nuclear is the only way to do that. And Microsoft has kind of primed the pump. They have made a deal deal with the operators of the infamous 3 Mile Island. If you remember, that was the site of that nuclear accident that melted down Unit 1.
Yes.
Well, the
and
other
the China Syndrome movie with Jane Fonda, and I can't remember who all else, right?
But the truth of the matter is that the other unit that was part of that power plant was unaffected by it, and it was just like turned off because nuclear power got such a bad rap. Well, Microsoft has said, tell you what, we will contract with you for 20 years, I think it is, to generate power for our needs, and we'll pay for that power plant to be reconditioned, refurbished, and brought back online. And so that has generated a lot of interest outside of just the 3 Mile Island project, because tech companies are now taking the lead in advocating for additional sources of nuclear power. The United States already has the largest fleet of nuclear power plants in the world, generating 100 gigawatts of power already. They want to triple that basically to generate 300 gigawatts. And they think that they're going to do it by, one, activating some of these dormant power plants like 3 Mile Island, also taking power plants that might be scheduled to be closed and saying, no, let's extend the life of this particular power plant. Let's find a way to invest in it and grow its footprint. And lastly, one of the more innovative things that are being looked at is taking old coal-fired power plants that already have the infrastructure for distributing power and locating new, smaller nuclear power plants within those facilities and making use of the existing infrastructure to distribute the power that they generate, so that you can do this really quickly and don't have to spend trillions of dollars developing a power plant from the ground up.
It's really a great idea that they've come up with, and particularly reusing those coal plants, or what they're talking about, transitioning plants. Operating coal plants they'd get shut down, rebuilt, and then transitioned into nuclear. And they're talking about the number of jobs it could generate so that they can replace the jobs that the coal workers, those who work in the coal plants, are going to lose. I don't know about coal miners, because I can understand people that work in a power plant, whether it's nuclear or coal-fired or oil-fired. There's probably a number of things in the operation that are similar. And so those are you can transition from, you're just changing what you're using to produce the energy. So I can see those people being gainfully employed. I don't know what happens to the guys that are going down into the mines and digging the coal, because obviously if those coal plants start transitioning to oil or to nuclear, there's less of a need for coal, and those guys are out of business. And we're talking about a lot of places in Appalachia, Kentucky, Tennessee, and so forth, West Virginia, where you have coal jobs. So what do you do for those folks? I mean, that's going to be, and the United Mine Workers is going to have a say in this as well.
Sure, but those plants are getting shut down anyway. So what this is going to do is give those communities new life, right? So rather than shutting down probably the number one or number two employer in the region and having all of the youth and folks that would otherwise work in those facilities go someplace else, now you're going to give them new life, and you're going to give them a cleaner kind of career, because these are all going to be much more technical careers, right? So these are engineers, these are going to be technicians, these are going to be power plant maintenance folks, and it's not going to be working in the coal mines. And I will probably venture to argue that if you ask a coal miner, much like if you asked a field worker here in Salinas, hey, do you want your child to do what you do? They're going to say, hell no.
Yeah.
I want my kid to have a better life. And if that means that this coal mine gets shut down and he gets to work at a nuclear power plant, then that's going to be the best thing for us. And we'll figure out how we're going to transition. So don't worry about us.
No, that's a very fair point, and I think a lot of people tend to overlook that. Alrighty, so that's our chat for today, and some really interesting information there. Now, looking ahead to Monday, we're going to be talking about AM radio, like 1460. Many of you listen to this radio station either on 101.1 FM or 1460 AM, and we've got some good news regarding AM radio that we're going to be talking about on Monday, right, Lewis?
Yeah, if you don't have an AM radio as part of your disaster planning kit at home, you might want to invest in a one, because it may be the only source of information during the disaster at some point. You'll learn more about that on Monday.
Alrighty, that's Monday morning starting at 8:30 here on Power Talk Radio. Luis Alvarez, CEO of the Alvarez Technology Group, has been our guest. Online, it's alvareztg.com, at alvareztg, that's the X handle, and Luis, the toll-free number for the I-Team.
Give us a call at 866-78-I-Team. That's 866-784-8326.